What this is, for people who may not be aware, but on a bandsaw, the one thing that'll get you quicker than anything is trying to cut something round. When the blade goes straight down, it'll grab a hold of that round thing and start trying to spin it. And as they say in some of the engineering books, results are unpredictable. So anyway, what I have found is a way to deal with this situation is to use this fixture. I think Mike Peace referred to it as an Iron Maiden. But what you do here is, I think Dan can get a picture of the bolts there. Anyway, you clamp the thing so that the log is not prone to want to rotate or anything like that. If you're going to cut off a small slice, you set it part way in. If you're going to cut off a bigger slice, you would move it further in. What I've got at the back end here is there's a piece of wood that goes into the miter slot that has a nut screwed into the bottom of the slot.
Back up a little bit. See the nut underneath there.
Yeah. So there's a nut right underneath here that will stop the movement, so you don't wind up cutting your sled in half. And the idea is when you get that, you can take that piece off, put it in a drill press, punch it out, put a piece of dowel in there, and make a top out of it. All right, that's.
You can give that to Dan. He's gonna put some.
Oh yeah. I know, Dan's probably going to need some of those for doing tops at the woodworking show. The other sled that I wanted to.
Can you turn the logs lengthwise in that?
No, it's just for cross-cutting logs.
You could do something similar to that for the resawing. They actually sell one out here that's same basic principle, but it holds it and you put a bolt on there and go through.
The other thing that I wanted to show you is frequently you're in need to cut something round in the shop, a large round object. So what I did is I developed another jig here where you can take whatever material you want to cut round, identify where on here you want the center of the radius. So I'll just arbitrarily pick a point, and this jig starts out with an XY coordinate in the center, and then off of that center line you've got your radius line, and I've got a pin set at the 2-inch mark. So when we get done, we'll have a 4-inch diameter circle, and it's real easy to make one of these things work.
Was that in a pre-drilled hole underneath?
Nope.
Okay.
So about that center point there is where we're gonna turn this thing. I think I might have enough room there. Yeah. So the idea is when you get done, you got a nice circular piece there for whatever you need. I know the turners usually make a whole set of these things of various diameters so that they can lay the thing down on the end of the log and figure out if they got enough material to do what they want to do there.
So Bob, as a variation, this is a fixture that I brought in, which I use for roughing ball blanks. Mm-hmm. And it has a 1/4-inch pin. But it's similar to your design, except that I have the drilled holes.
Yep. Well, why don't you come up and talk about it a little bit while we're on the subject of making
I
circles?
didn't know you were going to do the groundwork for me.
Won't stay there.
Yeah, how about there?
But it's simple, and this has been used a lot. I've made maybe 50 bowls using this fixture, but it's a 1/4-inch pin. All I did was draw a line across here perpendicular to that, and then draw out from the blade. And I put them 1/2 inch apart. It gives you a 1-inch variations in diameter. But I just drill a 1/4-inch hole in the center of my blank,
Okay.
and set that on there, and then I can spin them around similar to what you just did.
Do you move your pin on that to?
Yeah. You get a hold of it with a pair of
Pliers.
diagonal cutters or something like that. That's usually the easiest thing to grab a hold of. But you just grab that and put it in another slot. If you got something custom, you just take a drill and punch a new hole in there.
I wouldn't dump it.
Yes, sir.
What do you use as a stop to keep the jig from going too far through the bandsaw?
Again, you know, it just kind of.
Same concept.
Yeah. So I've just got a nut that I put in the miter slot
Mine has a
guy
cleat
there.
on it.
Yeah, he's got a big cleat that he screws onto the end of his there to accomplish the same thing. Any other questions? All right, we'll leave both of these up here for you to look at. Yes, sir.
I did one, I took a 2x4 piece of plywood, 3/4 inch plywood,
Yes.
clamped it to the back of the bandsaw, and then did a 4-foot diameter circle. But I had the big piece of plywood there to hold the piece as I was cutting it. The same thing with the pin, but I put the pin 2 feet out, and then I had the 4-foot so that there was enough support there. I cut a 4-foot diameter tabletop on my bandsaw. Same principle, just a bigger piece.
Haven't seen some of the bandsaws you've got. I was thinking capable of throat.
I've got an 18-inch throat. But what I did was, the circle, I cut off the corners of the piece that I was going to cut into the circle, so I could get it around. And then basically I was cutting, you know, maybe 3 or 4 inches off the circle. But I'm making a table for our church, and they wanted something solid cherry, and that then it's 4 foot in diameter. It's a good size table.
How thick is it?
3/4 inch.
Oh, okay.
And then it's got a skirt around the edge that I laminated 4 pieces of real thin stock around the edge, so it'll all match.
I thought I might get the prize today for the simplest jig,
Oh, no, I got that one coming.
but after seeing the Iron Maiden with all the moving parts, I'm quite sure this is going to do that. It's simply a box, or you put a box on it, or you put a frame on it. It was inspired by a frame jig that I had to cut splines in frames, and in the middle of the night I was trying to figure out how to use my picture frame jig on a box, and it wasn't coming to me, so I dreamed this thing up. It's really simple. You put the box in here, and I haven't even finished making it yet, actually. I've still got to put it on the router table. It's designed for the router table, and actually I got to put it on the table saw and put the dado blades on it, and get rid of about probably an inch worth of wood down here, and it just goes up against the fence. We'll use that as a fence and not knock anything off. On the router table, and you can either put a dovetail bit in the router, or you can put a straight bit in the router and simply use your fence. Then you can put blocks of wood in here to move it over a certain distance. So I think it's going to work well. It's sort of an untried jig.
Put spaces in there to space the box over instead of moving the fence.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So what are you making out of it?
We usually like jewelry boxes or heirloom boxes or humidors, or any kind of a box that I would put together with, I suppose, principally a 45-degree angle joinery rather than a box joint or a dovetail joint, and then put that in there and cut the decorative splines in it and use a different color wood to kind of contrast it.
He's talking about like the corner of the wood, you put a spline through, then you put a wood inside there.
Yeah,
and
you
then
could
clean it up.
use that, that is kind of a, you know, that tray will work, you just stick it down in there to show how it's gonna work. You just
Oh.
need or any kind of box-like thing. Hey, a box, there you go.
Broken parts in it.
And you just set it up on the router table fence and get your spacers right and whatever router bit you want to put in, and then you run it through and turn it and run it through and you turn it, then you change the distance with a spacer so you can put 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on how thick and how tall your box is.
You normally use a pretty thin veining bit, right?
Yes, 1/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
So it's strictly decorative.
Yes, very
Yes,
decorative.
exactly.
Well, I suppose it's more than decorative. When you have a 45-degree joint here.
Once you put it in there.
Yeah, once you put it in there, it strengthens it a
Would
great
that
deal.
not work on a table saw just as well? against the table
Yes,
saw?
in fact, as I was sitting here, I thought, if I wanted a very narrow spline, more narrow
Like
than
an
1/8 of an
1/8
inch, yeah, I could make a saddle like I had on my frame jig, a saddle over the fence on the table saw, which would give it a little more stability than just running up against the fence, I suppose.
Like one did.
Yeah. Like
Is
that,
that
yeah.
yours?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Thanks, Hans.
If you gotta use that, just be careful not to cut into the screws that are
Yes.
holding it together. I'm not gonna tell you how I know.
Well, actually, the first time.
It's YouTube video number 26.
My belief was this screw was short enough and high enough that it wasn't going to be a problem, but I'm going to start the dado blades out here and kind of work in, and if things turn bad, I'm going to take this screw out before I hit it. I know I
If you
am.
see sparks, you'll move it. You take it out.
I saw an article in Fine Woodworking using that same kind of jig. But what they did is they used a dovetail bit and then cut the material for the spline as a dovetail that fits in that.
Yeah, I'm hoping
And
to
it
do
really-
that, yeah.
It really made a real artistic difference, you know, just.
Yeah, I've seen the dovetail splines in boxes, and I really liked them, which is why I went to the trouble of actually doing this.
The other thing you can do to keep your boxes, your splines the same distance, is you cut one and then flip the box around.
Oh, and you make the other
And you
one
make the
right
other.
there without
But I
ever
like
doing
it,
anything.
but I was wondering about making the ones in the middle, but I love your spacer idea. I hadn't thought of that. You put the spacer in, put any in the center, you can put your spacer in every how much you want to space it over, cut it, flip it, and you double it up like that.
Maybe this whole class could be on a spline jig, and we can talk about applications and all go home and really make a good
Schedule him, Rob. Well, let's start off with this. See, now, I want to win the simplest jig award. This just came up because next week, I'm going to do a thing on bandsaw boxes. In order to line up this mag fence, I needed some way of getting it completely straight on here against the blade. So I got this on here. If I put that on like that, and make sure it's good there, I can lock it down. These are great, you know, compared to the other one. And you put this one on, and then you're completely lined up for doing that part when I do this next Saturday. So that's the entire thing. Now, is that the simplest so far? Do I go to the next one? Okay. This was something I was looking for, a way of cutting close to the fence. And I got the saw stop, and you just put this over the fence on each side, and it keeps it nice and, you know, it's just perfect where it fits on there. And I'll just push it across the board. I've seen different ones. You'll end up cutting up a little bit on the bottom as you get through that part.
So the features are that it uses keys. The other piece here, I can show you the keys. So this is for cutting, the part that's on there is for cutting the part in the end. So the part here would be here and clamped, and it would be even with here. So, by the way, these clamps are slightly modified. These come with a fairly small end. These are just carriage bolts, and it turns out that I think it's, well, a 1/4 inch carriage bolt will work. And it turns out that these little things, anyway, I get a much better clamping action with this. It doesn't look quite as nice, but it works better than the tiny tip. So, I'm sorry. Oh, this is all from Home Depot. They're like crutch tips or something like that. Crutch tips.
Chair tips.
Right. And they just give me a much bigger clamping. So I just took the original ones, which and just put these carriage bolts on. So this piece is for doing the ends, and there are keys here so that this is never going to be out of square. You cannot rotate this because there's a key. I was about to show you. Here's the other piece. It has two keys because it's wider. So when it's mounted, it cannot be out of square, which is one of the advantages. The other large advantage is, and most of the jigs, actually all of the jigs that I saw did not have this. This design completely captures the router. So I think I can show you. So there are movable stops. These also have keys so they cannot go this way. You don't want them to rotate, otherwise you can't depend on the spacing. So the design has keys this way so that they can slide but not rotate. So also, and I hope you can see this, in the back there is a slot or a channel. And it's basically just a piece of 1/4-inch hardboard. Oh, so I can't see the camera, but so it's 1/4-inch hardboard. So when you put the router on, and this is it's designed to use for an edge guide, and this particular one is the Porter cable, but it can be used. The router's not a Porter cable. It turns out that the Porter cable edge guide works great on the rigid router. This is one of like 6 routers, so this one's pretty dedicated to this. So you take the edge guide and you use a piece, this is 1/4-inch red oak, matches the slot. So let me clamp this because it's going to fall and things are not going to be good. So I think just one clamp, one clamp will.
Well, that's recessed underneath there. It might be better on the
Oh,
workbench there.
well, actually, I just want it so it can't tip. So this is not going to work. But we'll do it this way.
We'll use that simple.
I think this will just keep it from tipping. All right, so when you put the router in, and I'll have to come around this way since I'm right-handed. This piece here, and of course, this is adjustable. It's an edge guide, so it's adjustable. This one has a veneer, and that it's a big plus here, but you don't really need that. So the little piece of oak drops in the slot. So when you make your mortise, you cannot get a bad mortise. You cannot get it. It's going to be square.
Oh, I can screw
It's,
I'll bet you
no, you can't. You can't do it with this. You cannot move the router forward or backwards because it's captured in the slot. The stops are going to keep you from. So when you do your mortise, the router is locked or captured so that the mortise will always be straight across because it's pushed back. It will be the same width mortise, and it will be almost all the other jigs you push the router against a guide. This one is locked into the slot, so you can't really get out of the slot. So you end up with these terrific mortises that are perfect matches. And of course, by adjusting these slots, you can make however long you need it. This is a 1/4-inch spiral bit, which I prefer. Of course, you could use a 3/8 or even a 1/2 if you needed really thick material. So normally, and I don't want to take a huge amount of time here. Let me take that off. So normally, Normally, I start out by using the pieces that have the ends, put them here, and then adjust this to approximately the center. And it doesn't have to be right in the center, but approximately the center, and then lock it down with the bolts. Well, I'm sorry, that's misleading because this has to be lined up here. So then you mark it. I put a mark on this piece with this center line, which, can you see the center line? Yeah, the center line, yeah.
Yep.
And so I mark this piece and I go ahead and cut. So, and I'm not really only cutting one piece here. Normally there's a bunch, or at least 4. So I'm marking a piece here and I go ahead and cut my mortise. I don't try to do stops. I just push it down a little bit, move it. It's best to push it over, lift it, bring it back. Otherwise, the bit wants to cut on one side and then the other, and it will make the mortise slightly larger. So you cut one direction, lift up, come back. I usually make 3 passes, and I make about 1 inch deep. So my loose tenons are about 2 inches long. There is some homemade scale here. Turns out that if you're going to make these are set at 1/2 inch, but the mortise is 1 1/4 because it turns out that you've got to allow for the radius of the bit on both sides, which is the diameter of the bit. So setting these at 1 inch makes 1 1/4 inch mortise. And obviously I can make any length I want. So I cut this pieces, and then this comes off, and this piece goes on like so, and of course it's in keys. And now this is adjusted so that, let me get my reach it. So this would be the piece like so. So this would mount, so you'd raise this up. Now actually this one's easier because these overhang on purpose, so that you just bring this up against those two, lock it down. Then I'm going to use the mark that I made here, which I align with this. Now, I really didn't have to measure it. I eyeball it for the center. I have a mark, which is the center because I cut it from this. Then I just basically take this with its mark and put it wherever I want this and make a mark that matches this mark. All right, now I can put this in this way and cut these mortises. And of course, I use the face of the material against this on both sides. So I've cut this off center just on purpose. It doesn't matter if it's centered, as long as both pieces are registered against this surface. So again, it's hard to screw this up. And I'm like everybody else, I can do it if. So would you hand me one of those tenons, Bob?
Just have to make sure that you've got the faces that you want outward.
Oh, right. And now if you're doing, this is just two pieces of scrap plywood. But if you were doing like legs, you would have to move the route, you'd have to cut the tenons would still be in the same place this way, the mortises rather. But you'd have to adjust the, how much the router bit is out for the thicker material, which is fairly easy to do because it's an edge guide. And this one is super easy because it's got a veneer. But so once you do this, I'm making, this is a red oak tenon. It's a piece of oak, and I cut it down to 1/4 inch and then rounded it over with an 1/8 inch. And I did this really in a hurry last night because I just thought of this. So I cut this. Again, it doesn't have to be centered. If I were doing this for a real project, I would probably pay a lot more attention to centering, but it doesn't have to be. And then and that's not bad. I don't like making mortises and tenons. I don't like all the chisel work and so forth and so on. I find this to be so much better. We all have our...
That's a pretty strong joint, too.
It's super strong, and yeah, you can go ahead and pass it around.
Do you move that bar back and forth to square it up with the top?
What bar?
The one with the clamps on it.
No. It's automatically squared. It's got a key. It cannot rotate.
Well, you didn't have your piece when you set it up, or
Oh.
you didn't have it against that bar, is the reason I was asking.
Oh, I'm sorry, it goes against the bar. It goes against, the bar is, there's 2 bolts here with slots. So when I put the piece, which I don't have, oh, I have another piece here. I must have thought ahead. So when I have the piece here, this is moved over where it's approximately in the center and locked down. Now I can make 20 pieces that are exactly the same. That's basically it. Again, this looks a little massive. The original, I had some, this is poplar, and it was 8/4, and I happen to have some. I think the original called for 6/4. Turns out that you could make it about anything, but you really have to have this wide enough so that the router can sit here and not tend to tip. And in this particular case, is it plant? In this particular case, when I put the router in, it's thick enough where the router doesn't tip. If this were made out of narrow material, I think you would have a problem with, it's all locked down, but it could still tip.
You can always wind it on the back side.
You could always wind it on the back. I find it to be, as I said, I looked at least a dozen different, there's some ones that are simpler. This was the only one that locked the router so that it can't move back and forward and stopped across. Questions? Yes?
You made your own tenon. Is there a reason for that other than price rather than box? Because they obviously make tenons.
Well, this is one tenon, but no, I made this out of, like a 3-foot piece of 1/4-inch oak, and it takes no time at all to make 20 tenons or 50 tenons or whatever, because you're making it all in one strip, running it across the router to do the round over, and then cutting them up into 2-inch. So the last thing is that I took the liberty of, this is a Woodworkers Journal article. It's got nice plans with the article, and also the guy that apparently designed it made a super nice video on YouTube. So I did a sheet where you got a link to the original article and the video. So you guys can, I didn't bring really enough, but depending on how many are interested. For me, the loose tenon joinery, and remember, you can make these as wide as you want. You could make multiple if you want to, if you're worried about the tenon itself expanding, just make a couple of narrow ones. I find it would be way better than normal mortise and tenon joinery, and actually stronger in some cases. Yes?
What kind of projects are you making that you're using the mortise and tenons on there? Face frames or?
Well, face frames sometimes, yeah, although I'm a big pocket hole fan. Tables, legs, that kind of thing. There's lots of projects that are on, Woodsmith and all that use normal mortise and tenon. Many times you can use this and save yourself a lot of time. This doesn't get used a lot. Actually, I had to dig it out because it had been stored for like 2 months or 3 months or however long it's been. But it's one of the, like all of our jigs, it's there when you need it, but you don't use it every day, or even every week, or even every month.
Save you a day though when you do use it.
Well, and you get this really precision joiner with almost no work. Anybody interested in?
Pass
Just pass it around.
Just a question, with that flat tenon, do you have any trouble with the glue not allowing the tenon to seat?
No, I'm not making it super tight.
Okay, that, I noticed that one was pretty tight.
This was, I did that last night because I was sitting around and said, I need to bring something, and then I remembered this. So the tenon itself is a little sloppy, but I would have made it better.
A little smaller, yeah.
Yeah.
We got a big stick here. You want to do that next?
Yeah. Big stick next.
Big stick.
I think I know what that is, but let's hear about it.
Now, somebody wanted the prize for the simplest, I wanted the prize for the biggest.
Longest.
This is basically for straight lining a piece of board. If you got a two pieces of board, you want to edge join them or something like that, and you want to make sure that those edges are perfectly straight. That's what this is for. Or for, this is actually isn't my jig, it's a friend of mine's jig. He's a professional cabinet maker, and that's what he uses for his base frames, to get them all perfectly straight in the line. This piece is just a piece of 3/4 inch plywood with this outside edge being the factory edge, so that's, you know that it's coming to you straight. This is just basically a sled to hold the piece on. We got a little piece of board that I can use. Yeah, that'll work. Thank you. And basically, the piece that you're trying to straight edge, you put in here, clamp it in, and then run it through your table saw with this edge against the fence. And you just basically just want to shave off just a very little bit, and then you do that enough so that you just shave a little bit the whole length of the board. And when you've done that, that edge is perfectly straight. And then you can use it then you can just flip the board over and use just the board itself, using that straightened edge against the fence. Now you've got a perfectly straight piece of board that you can use for face framing, furniture, or to join two pieces together. Now obviously this is pretty good size. You can make this any length that you want for any width of material you want to use. Yes, sir.
I've been using this system for years. I made a shorter one because this one would be too long for my shop, but I made a 4-foot one. It turns out that you don't just shave. You can use a piece of wood that's got a curve like this on one side. It doesn't really matter. It can be super rough. You just put the straightest edge against here. Make your cutting away all of the irregular things. Once you do that, you now have a straight edge. You remove this jig and use that edge against the table saw fence, and now you have, and it works great. You can, it's like a joiner. You can, the stuff's.
Yeah, in fact, you don't really need.
You really don't need a joiner.
And what it replaces.
I find the 4-foot to be most of it works for most things.
For myself, if I were doing it, I would make one shorter. But he's making 5-6 foot long cabinets.
On mine, I also added, and this, you'll find if you make one of these, it's important. So I have these, but I also have another one here that's higher. So if I'm using 6/4 or 8/4 wood, this won't clamp 8/4 because it won't come down and lock. So I have another clamp that's raised higher. So I have two sets of clamps.
Yeah,
so
and you could also use the same
clamp, either 4/4 wood or 6/4 wood,
or you could also use the same concept that he did on his jig and replace, and
yes,
use
and those, that really works better. So anyway, that was, I built it like this, then I added the additional clamps. At first I was trying to adjust the clamps, and it's really better to have two sets with a riser so that you can use the.
We only got clamps. They have clamps that'll adjust to different heights.
Oh, yes, and you could use those as well, and actually, that would maybe even a better idea.
On a wider board, where you've got that piece of 1/4 inch sticking out like this, the board's sitting on?
Yes.
It comes out and it lays flat, it's gonna lay down like
It's
that.
The thing is, if this is made to do something, probably a piece 4 to 6 inches wide. If you're doing regular 8 inches, yeah, you'd probably want to make this slip a little longer.
Not really. It doesn't. You don't really need to do that, as it turns out. So
But
yes,
if
it
your
will.
board
It
tilts
will
down like
tilt.
that, it's gonna change to 90 degrees.
It tilts. But so what you do, you have to make one extra pass. So you cut your first one, which now has a bevel edge.
Cut your opposite side. Flip
Now
it.
you flip that over and use that edge to get a straight edge. Then you flip it one more time and take off the bevel, shave off the bevel.
The bevel.
And it works so you can use it with almost, I use it with 8, 10, 12, 20 inch wood. Because who cares if it dips down, because you're gonna be cutting that off. You just gotta make one extra pass.
You might have a bevel, but at least it's straight.
It's a straight bevel, that's correct.
Straight, but just at a slight angle or whatever.
Correct,
you place there.
correct.
No, I didn't know you can't do.
This looks like another one we can put in the back of your van. We could fix some of that banana wood that you got.
Oh, that's what I want. It's a metal
Great for
cord.
that.
these are mine. All this is lathe oriented. You know, I make a lot of jigs for holding material on the lathe instead of using, because oftentimes I'm making multiple things. If you try putting it in the chuck and you want to take it off and do another one, you really have trouble getting it back in the chuck and getting it to run true. So what I do is I make a jig that has a hole that's threaded for my spindle. And I've got dozens of these things. So this is my pendant material. I just super glue the block of wood. This is my waste block here. I'll super glue my material onto that waste block, and then it's there. It's always going to run true. Every time I put it back in the lathe, it's going to run the same. So that's one. And then the same principle. Here's another one that's threaded. But these are for doing little birdhouse ornaments. You know, got the birdhouse body and the lid. Well, when I'm doing the body, I've got my material. I've got material on the leg. Let's see, can you should hold that steady for the camera. Hold that steady for the camera, man. I've got my material mounted on the lathe like this in the chuck. I've got a block of wood in the chuck, or I've got a thing like this. I come in and I bore my hole. I bore a 3/4 inch hole down about that far, and then I come in with a 5/8 inch hole going down to my depth that I want. Well, then if I need to be able to turn it around to do the shaping, well, what this is done here, this is a 3/4 inch and this is a 5/8, and there's my chuck. I put that back on the spindle, and now I can go ahead and shape the bottom side of the ornament. And then the same sort of thing for the top of the birdhouse. I've got the material in the block held in the chuck like this, and I come in and I form this tenon here and undercut the eave and take a little bit out of there. And then once you get that done, I've got another jig here. I'm using PVC here because it'll be a little bit more durable than wood. Same thing. That gives me a fairly tight fit. Bring the tail stalk up. I can go ahead and shape the top side of the ornament at the end. And then I've got a snug enough fit here that once I get the bulk of the wood off, I can take it off, and that holds tight enough that I can finish off the top then and drill the hole. And then that comes together and gives you a little birdhouse ornament. And I do a lot of bottle stoppers. And when I'm finishing the bottle stopper, I want to have some way to hold it for putting the finish on and holding it for buffing. So this is just a 3/4 or 3/8 by, what was it, 3/8 by 16, just regular standard size bolt that's threaded, same size thread from a bottle stopper. So once I get the bottle stopper turned and sanded, you know, that'll set up on my workbench. Workbench has got the dog holes. It'll sit down there, and that's why I can apply
threads on the inside of that.
With a tap and die, with a tap.
Just a regular tap and die?
Yeah, I drill the hole. Same way as on here. I'll drill the hole. Now, if the wood is real soft, I'll drill the hole and then I'll put thin CA in there to strengthen the wood, and then I'll tap it, and then I'll go back and put another coat of thin CA and harden the threads up a bit more, and then I'll tap it again. Now when I'm tapping it, I've only got this bit here. This is in separate pieces. So I've got a hole drilled all the way through, and I tap it all the way through. And then put CA on the threads, tap it, more CA on, and then run the tap through again to clean the excess CA out.
Use thin CA.
Yeah. But the same thing here. I just drill a hole and just run a tap into there. And again, using CA to strengthen the wood fibers. But it gives a pretty good, you can get pretty good threads on it. So that's why I use this one then for holding it while I'm putting the finish on, because I typically use an oil finish, and I'll put maybe 5 or 6 coats of oil on, so it's just sitting off the side, and I'll come in the morning, put a coat of oil on, let it sit there, and next morning I'll put another coat on. So over a period of a week or so, I'll have 5 or 6 coats of oil on it, and then I got some way I can hold it then when I'm buffing it. I'll sand it, and then I got a nice handle there where I can hold it when I buff it on the wheel. So that's for that type of stopper. Anybody else want to see the threads on that?
So you've got 20 of them.
Yeah, well, maybe 10. So that, for that type of stopper, then also do this type of stopper where it's just got a dowel in it for the silicone type stopper. Well, this is the same sort of thing. It's just got a hole drilled in it to hold it like that for when I'm put the finish on, and then again I've got a handle to hold it when I'm doing the buffing on it.
And it don't fly across the street.
Right. Well, it could still fly across the room if you're not careful.
Not on the buffer rail.
That depends on the friction fit.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to fit. And I'm not going to run the buffer down like this where it's trying to pull it out. I'm holding it up here like this where it's going to be forcing it back down on. Okay, so that's a way to hold the material on the lathe where you got it threaded. Well, another solution is to make a mandrel that's got a number 2 Morse taper on it. That you can put that in the spindle, and you could shape this however you want out here. You could do the same sort of thing as this. Just glue it on there and make this bigger out here and glue it on. And for those of you who have signed up for the tool making class, this is what we're going to be using to turn the tool handles. We're going to turn this down, then we're going to turn this down here to make a tenon to fit the hole that we're going to drill into the tool handle, and then that's what's going to drive the tool handle to make the tool handle. So you don't need a chuck, you can just a simple piece of wood.
You have a jig for the Morse taper?
Well, that's coming up next. So in order to make that,
Comes out of his box.
you just take a block of wood and just lay it on there. Take one piece of wood, hold it against the taper, glue it and tack it down. Put another piece of wood on, just bring it up against the Morse taper and tack it down. So now you've got a jig for a Morse taper. And then when you're turning it, you got on the lathe, you're turning it, you test to make sure you're getting it right.
It's getting pretty simple, Rob. I mean that, like I said.
Oh, no, this is much easier.
Yeah, it would be.
And I think it was one of our last Jigs and Fixtures. Mike Peace had we called it a Fibonacci gauge.
What?
Fibonacci gauge.
Well, I don't know if that's the right term or not. Fibonacci develop a sequence of numbers where you start with 1 and 0, you add those two numbers together, get 2. Well, then you add the next 1 and 2 together and get 3, 2 and 3 together you get 5, and 3 and 5 together you get 8, 13. So that's a Fibonacci numbers. Well, this is a golden mean or golden rule. And I haven't quite equated yet how the Fibonacci numbers relate to the golden mean numbers. But what golden mean is,
They're close. They're not exactly.
is you have, the ratio for golden mean is 1 to 1.61803, whatever.
That's a
But
1.16.
But things that are, there's a lot of things in nature. Flower petals, the diameter of the flower related to, or the center of the flower related to the petals, the number of petals around the flower. They're all have these types of numbers.
That makes life too complicated.
Yeah. But anyway, what this is that I've got this rule here. I've got a line on here. If I've got that dark enough where you can see it.
Man, I was in the gutter business and my room zone had a fork.
Okay.
We couldn't read all this.
I've got a line here that this is 100 millimeters and this is 162 millimeters. So that's 1.62 instead of 1.618. So with this rule, that gives you that proportion. No matter where you set it, you're still going to have, this is going to be 1 and this is 1.618 of the ratio. So if you look at things in nature and something looks attractive, it's most likely based on this ratio. And I've been reading about it on the internet and all sorts of things. Even dentists use it for teeth.
You got it covered?
You look at a face that's attractive, a human face. Another face that's not quite so attractive. Well, the attractive face probably has these proportions as far as the eye spacing, the nose and mouth spacing, and is probably on this, based on this. And
your bases all follow that. All the bases in the woodworking.
well, in that other thing was a bowl. I say, Mike Peace had this, a year or so ago, and I was sort of interested in it, but I didn't know what kind of dimensions to use. Well, Steve got me into watching Steve Ramsey on the YouTube videos. Well, Steve Ramsey made one of these a while back, and he referenced this paper here. And here's the dimensions on there, and they're too small to even read. And so I couldn't get the dimensions off of there. And here it says, if you have any questions, you'll notify me. Well, there's no contact information in there either. So I just started searching on the internet, and I found another site that had this. It had the dimensions. Had the dimensions and the layout of it, and that's what I used to make this then.
Well, tell me how you use that in your woodworking.
Well, for Christmas tree ornaments. You know, so I'm thinking this will be the size of my body, and that'll be the size of the finial. And then when I get the body done, use this for the body, and then this will be the size of the icicle. And then in the icicle itself, you always put a little element in the center. You've seen mine, it sort of comes down, it's got a little bulb on it, then it comes down like that. Well, the length of the icicle, and that's where I put that center element at, right there. And it just makes it look more organized.
Or the length and the width of just a rectangular box?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the Parthenon is designed using...
Yeah, if you go inside, every element in the Parthenon, all the width and the height and the columns and the upper part is all based on this ratio. And a lot of other architecture, you know, can't think of what anyone was there, but there's quite a few pictures of different architects. It's all based on this ratio.
What do you hold it together with?
They're binder screws I got at Ace Hardware.
Oh, okay.
Binder post.
To show you another simple thing that where that carries forward to in everyday life.
Yeah. If you do this dimension here, matches that. That's the ratio there on that side, and this is this side here.
I'm Dick Gray. I make and I've sold quite a few of the compound cut Christmas ornaments. And people that buy individual ones, why, so they can display them for the year. I made this jig in order to make a bracket that they can hang on. And the way I do it, I take a piece of 2-inch by maybe 10-inch long 3/16 plexiglass, and I'll sand it. And when you sand plexiglass, it makes it look like frosted glass. It comes out really good. And then I take and put it in here and hold this back. I put it in here, and then I take a heat gun and hold it in there, and I slowly bend it up. And as I get it up here, then I've got double-sided tape on this. I put it in to hold it.
Can you put it under the table?
Oh, I'm sorry. As I'm bending it up, when I get to the point where I can shove this in and hold it in place, then I bend it up like this. Now I pre-drilled the hole in there for the hook, and with a heat gun, just keep heating it, and until you get the shape that you want, and then hold it in place with a stick or whatever, because it's hotter than Hades. Hold it in place until it cools off, and you've got a bracket.
What hole is this bracket? This piece in here. You can pull them against it all the time.
I like this in a vise.
Yeah, but that piece of wood that your thumb's
Piece of wood under your thumb. What holds that in place?
Double stick tape.
Oh, double stick tape.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I missed that.
But you have to wait until it gets bent up a certain distance before you can put this in, that's all. But
When you bend that, what are you making now?
Pardon me?
What are you making when you bend that plexiglass?
It's a bracket to hang a Christmas ornament on,
Okay.
a compound cut Christmas ornament.
What do you just mount the plexiglass to a base or whatever to set
The
it on
base
the table?
itself holds it, right?
Yeah, the base, let me show you how I cut it out here just briefly. To make one of these brackets, what I do, I'll start with a piece of plexiglass or whatever, 3/16 thick. But what I'll do, I'll take and shape it like this. I'll take and shape it on a bandsaw or whatever. And then this part goes in the underneath, and then as you bend around, that gives you a wide base on the bottom, and this comes up and you pre-drill a hole here, and then you can put your hook in here. It makes a real, I think,
Draw
makes a real
the
nice.
side view of the way it's finished.
Pardon me, sir?
Draw the side view of the way it's, when it's finished.
The curve of it.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
And the hook is up here like that, and then you hang your ornament.
So you bend the wide flat part now.
The wide flat part is the bottom to give you stability. But it seems to work out all right.
But he had so many orders at Christmas, he doesn't have any left.
Well, my problem is I've got 4 children. That's been a problem. But anyway, for example, they had a demonstration on making these butcher block cutting boards. So I figured, okay, I'll make my wife one. So I made one for her. She said, well, I think each one of the 4 kids will need one for Christmas. So I made those 4. And then when I gave them to the kids at Christmas morning, 2 married grandsons said, well, we'd like one. Well, I think I'm on either the 7th or 8th one right now.
That's called multiples.
Yeah, it's called something. My daughter used to be in the ottoman business. She made ottomans. Now she's in real estate. She's making more money in that. So, talking to her customers why they needed oval-shaped ottoman. Okay, what this is, it has 2 slides on it. I'm not used to that thing. On this bar right here, it's got 2 slides that go in these slots, and the dimensions that you want based on where you put these slides. Now, in this case, come on, George, you're getting me.
Got him all shook up here.
Yeah. I'm not used to this thing. So as you turn this, and out here on the end, I took a thread spool. You stick the pencil down in that and it'll hold it. But as you turn this, you get your nice oval shape. Now, depending on how big you want judges how large you make this base. Now, I've got a smaller base. It's probably 10 inches each way to make real small for a decorative thing to go on top of a table or something. But as this turns around, this slides here, and you draw your oval with it.
That's cool.
Works real good.
I've seen that in a magazine.
This was designed and made by George and given to me. So George knows about it, what it is. It's made for, camera angers, for doing
All those little pieces on that.
this is huge. But I'm just saying, real tiny, like, it would be more like doing this type stuff. When George has to hold it, I probably don't have the clamp. I don't have the clamp big enough.
Big for George's ones.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, let's just say this was one of George's and he wanted to sand it. He got it like that. And he also has it set up so it has, he can put.
What's the year to use that?
I've never used this.
But what I say, so George made it for me. I made him a zero clearance thing for his table saw or for his scroll saw, and he made me this. So I'm going a little bit different. We did jigs and fixtures. I thought tools that we may or may not use. Now, everybody knows when you're on a router table, all of us have so many hands and can handle all this stuff, and you got 2 wrenches, you got it, and that doggone bit, it just keeps wanting to go in that colic all the way down. Okay? It's worse to have the bit bottom out than it is to have it too high. So this is no big invention, but if you go to the store and get some O-rings, did the same thing. You get some O-rings, maybe on this will be better, you can see it. What I did is you take an O-ring and you put an O-ring on the, you know, whatever, you can get 1/2-inch O-rings or whatever size router bit you have. And then what that does is then when you put it in the colic, you drop it down, the O-ring stops it from going down. So now that hand, you don't have to use that hand to hold that bit. How many people have used that? I mean, I figured everybody had.
There's another version of it too. I've seen it at the woodworking show. They're little rubber balls.
Yeah, you just drop them in the your thing.
And it does the same one.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I just bought some O-rings. Okay. Now, the other thing, I figured, okay, I'm the simplistic, I'm the least woodworking person in here, but until somebody told me, I didn't know you could buy wrenches like this. You know, it's kind of hard when you do a router, you get 2 flat wrenches. But when you take that router and you put it in a router table, those flat wrenches don't, one works, but the second one just doesn't get to that until you have to bring that router all the way up as far as you can, and then it still doesn't work. But they've got these wrenches here. They sell them at Peachtree. And how many people have them? Probably everybody has them, right? But I'm just saying, if you don't have one, it solves that problem. If you have a router and a router table, it makes it a lot easier. And this is where I saw it at something like this. So I said, well, I'm going to bring that today. And then the other thing is this. We saw this demonstrated probably back, probably 8 weeks ago or nine sessions ago. That tool I bought cost me, I think it's less than $20. They have it out there. But it has this advantage. This is my router bit because it only stands like this. So I want that distance right there. So I can get exactly that. I'll back it up this way so you can see it, I guess. So you can get that exact distance, okay? Now, if this was a router table, and let's say I needed, that was where the bit was, and I needed exactly the distance from the outside of my cut to the fence. I can take this, put this in here, loosen this up, and what I can do is I can get that exact distance that I want, and this is a digital scale, which I don't have on right now. I can't. It's a digital scale, but I'm saying it is the best $20 I spent for adjusting the router both vertically and horizontally, and getting, you know, if you need a depth of a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch or 3/4 of an inch, it gives you that ability. It was a great tool. So I brought that. I didn't make it, I bought it, but what I'm saying is still a tool that I like to use. And then this tool, twice this week, we've already talked about stuff that is non-woodworking, and you find it in a different location, i.e., this you find in the quilt section of your store. And we take the, got my glasses on here. What am I doing, Rob? Well, there it is. Okay. I got to go this way. You take this off, and for cutting laminate, cutting veneer, cutting real thin wood, you can take a metal straight edge, run this down it, and it just cuts it just as like butter. But you find it's used for cutting material, okay? Now the second one I didn't bring because I do not have one yet, but if you go to the quilting store and you get the gauge they use for making the quilts, you know, making the squares for quilts, okay? It gives you a perfect tool, because what it is, it's a cylinder, it's a piece of plastic with a expanding grid. What you do is you drill a hole dead center in the middle where that dot is, and then you can use it on your lathe for positioning, for getting exact center. And you find that in the quilting store. So I just thought I would bring that today. I know it didn't meet the guidelines, but I brought it.
Give you guys a warning, do not borrow your wife's quilting.
No. And the person that knows that the best is probably this person right there.
Just one comment on the rotary cutters. They are extremely sharp.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the quilt shop where my wife works, they actually require the women to wear Kevlar gloves when they use those things. So if you do use one, be incredibly careful because they will slice the end of your finger right off.
But they really work well.
Oh, they do.
And I use this one particularly. The last time, it's probably like the person that had the other thing. I used this when we were doing the when we were doing the checkerboards and tic-tac-toe boards. When you want to cut straight laminate, when you want to cut the, what do I want to say? Veneer,
Yep.
and you want to cut straight line. You wanted some straight things for your light and dark woods. I mean that works so easy because you use a box cutter, and when you pull it, it has a tendency to gap on you. Where this with a roller, it seems to roll easier and cut better. So,
Yeah, this is also real handy on burl veneer. You know, something that's really difficult to cut with any other method. This keeps the burl from doing anything bad, like sliding one way or the other. It just rolls right with it. Another comment for those out there that don't have a tool like this, if you've got the straight blades, or the straight wrenches, you can heat these things up with a number of different torches. I've got probably 4 different torches around my shop that I took a bunch of these straight deals like this, put it in a vise, heat it up, whack it with a hammer, and bend it over, and then reverse it, do it the other way. And you wind up with some really nifty offset wrenches.
Question
Try
here.
without heating it.
Yeah.
It'll snap off, and you better duck. I did that.
And a lot of the older ones, at least the ones I have, to me are made out of cast. They're not made out of metal.
Yeah, don't try that on a cast.
Okay, and you had a question over there.
Actually, I had a comment, another variation on your grommet rubber rings. The other variation that I've seen is you find, and it's easy to do, find a 1/4 inch OD and a 1/2 inch OD O-ring. Just drop it down in the collet.
That's what he was saying back there.
No, he was saying a ball. This is O-ring.
Yeah, okay.
And so you only need 2 or whatever. And
If you were a excellent woodworker and you had a lot of money and you bought all your bits exactly at the same time and they were all the same length.
Yes. That's true. That's one thing about the O-rings, like what you're talking about, where it drops in and you kind of want to keep the same height on your bit.
Yeah.
The O-ring's adjustable for that, whereas the space ball, it'll let it drop all the way, it'll drop all the way down and not be.
Yeah, it depends on, if you got all the same style bits, and I know everyone in here has the same stuff. I got mine along the way at different places, you know.
I had the O-rings.
Buy a whole box of O-rings at Harbor Freight in every size for,
I mean, a box, so, I mean, this was all the same size, and all you need is the same, you only need 2 sizes.
Just all you have to do is take a couple O-rings, it's his idea, you drop in the bottom just as well.
Just so they don't stick.
That assumes all your bit lengths are the same, and that all of your routers have the same recess.
What we're trying to avoid is locking down.
No, but what I'm just,
You're trying to avoid the curve right under the top of the bit.
the other thing I'm trying to avoid, one is a safety issue, but the other issue is, I'm trying to put this in here and keep this bit at the right height, and also have 2 hands to tighten it, and I just don't have a 3rd hand.
The other thing on your curved wrench, you can actually adjust your router table so it kind of lays flat on the router table, and that way you're not doing this and not sliding off all the time.
Right, but I'm just saying, like I said, I didn't know these existed, and I wasn't going to bring it in. I figured everybody had one, so I said, okay. As long as I'm talking about the router stuff, I thought I'd bring it in. But I'll tell you, if you don't have one, it makes it a lot easier, and you save a lot of time, because if you don't have one of those, you're in a table, you've got to raise it a long ways to get so your wrenches will work.
You got different sizes of them too.
Yeah, there's two different, basically two different.
Bullets.
Yeah, they're two different sizes usually.
This is a little different theory. Tell me what's best. As I deal with CNC, I'm human, I don't measure very well. It measures so damned accurately that it throws me off, and it wants to repeat every time. Well, we were doing this project jointly with Alan, and the doors, 25 of them, may or may not be exactly the same on every dimension, but I wanted to be able to process them quickly through the machine, accurately to its terms. So simply built a jig and put it through the machine first by itself, exterior dimensions all the way around. It's now in effect memorized it. Made a drawing to those same dimensions down to 3 decimal points, allowing for a door to be dropped in where the machine also wants to keep it under pressure rollers as it's working. So the jig does nothing but lay there, and I don't touch it again once I've put a door in and committed it to the machine, but it saves 4 inches of extra wood on each end that would otherwise have to be cut off afterwards. It's always a known height, and the engraving always ends up exactly in the same spot. Something that thinks smarter than I do, and it just lays there.
Oh, I'm sorry, from here it looked like you had that was a gap over there where the hole is. It looked like there was I thought there was a gap in the jig.
Well, there's actually, Alan had done a very nice cove molding all the way around the outside edge. Now that does present something else when you're talking a machine that does its own measuring. It would want to see that coved edge as the end of the board. So I end up putting just a little piece of masking tape on both center lines. And then it reads the entire jig, positions it exactly in the center each time.
Because it sees an end.
Yeah.
All right, I think that concludes today's program. I think this beats standing out there in the rain watching a sawmill, doesn't it?